Welcome to Mental as Anyone.
I didn't know I'd be sitting here in a wig talking about mental health. Because anybody who's tuning in is going, yeah, this bitch got the answer.
I'm your host, JMO, and in this series we explore mental health.
If this is what life's going to be, I don't want to be here.
The battles, the triumphs, and the strategies to deal with mental health in a healthy way.
We are born and we are just told stories upon stories upon stories about how to live our life, and no one knows.
I'm the first to know that's not easy, having battled on my own journey. Now, I'll be speaking with others who are ready to share their own insights and lessons.
You know, you try to bury it, keep busy, and then all of a sudden it just swallows you whole.
This podcast is specifically designed to support you on your own journey. So join me as we learn together that we are mental as anyone.
You're out there, and every night you have to prove that you deserve to be there.
BYD isn't just powering this podcast. For nearly 3 years, it's been redefining the way I drive. It brings me peace of mind. I just charge it at home, no more detours to the petrol station. And the way it drives, so smooth and has instant power when you need it. It's got all the space, all the tech, and I feel good knowing it's better for the environment too. If you're even a little bit curious, check out the links in the show notes, and thanks BYD for helping bring Mental as Anyone to life. This episode is proudly brought to you by Chemist Warehouse, your go-to destination for all things health and well-being. From essential vitamins and supplements to skincare and fitness products, Chemist Warehouse offers everything you need to stay balanced and healthy. Plus, they're committed to supporting your health journey with affordable, high-quality products. Visit chemistwarehouse.com.au to explore their extensive range and take your next step in your well-being. She's a formidable force in business, education, an advocate for the queer community. Jennifer Westacott.
Thanks very much.
You are an extraordinary human.
Oh, thank you.
I saw you speak at a lunch 6 months or so ago, and your speech was really quite incredible.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You have this incredible way of speaking, and the energy that you created was...
Yeah. Oh, thank you. No, I was proud of that speech, yeah.
That was at a Acon lunch.
Yeah. Pride and Diversity Awards, yeah. No, it was a big day.
You've and I want to use my words carefully, but I'm just going to throw that out the window. So if I mean everything with respect. Mental as Anyone is a podcast about mental health, about overcoming your struggles, but also about getting through them, and how do you get through some of life's challenges. And you've had your fair share, I'm sure.
For sure, yeah, absolutely I have, yeah.
You've been at the fight. You've been at the front of the fight for many years across many platforms, as a woman in leadership, as a woman in the queer community. Yeah. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, look, it all starts, for me, I had a very difficult childhood, and, a family on very low income, very violent household, mother with what today would be diagnosed as, I'm sure, anxiety and depression, which then went to dementia. So watching her, struggle through life was really painful. And then, that just sort of, those things in your childhood make you commit to things. You want to do better. You want a society to look after people better. You want to do something about the injustices you saw as a kid. And I saw a lot of people with serious mental illnesses, many undiagnosed. And then I got the great opportunity to chair Mental Health Australia, which is the peak body for all the non-government organisations. And then you really get a sense of, how far behind we are on this. But you also get a sense of optimism, the data on recovery, the data on prevention. And you just think, boy, if we could only get our act together. But yeah, I've had my fair share of some very, very difficult things as a kid and as a young woman and as an adult. And you've just got to surround yourself with good people. I've had a relationship with my partner Tess for 37 years, and that's been this great stabilising force in my life, this great kind of counterbalance. She's like my moral compass, she's a very strong sense of ethics. But also you've always got to say to yourself, have I tried to do my best? Have I lived my values and beliefs? Have I tried to do the right thing? And then when bad things happen, or you cop a lot of criticism, as you do in public life, you just have to say to yourself, how do I get through this? The other thing I always give people advice on about how you get through tough times is routine. This is why I'm obsessed with people working. Like at the Business Council was obsessed with people with a mental illness being able to get a job and be treated properly in the workplace, because work is one of those things that gives you a sense of purpose, it gives you definition, it gives you fulfillment, good jobs. And, you know, I have been saved by having great jobs, albeit sometimes incredibly stressful jobs, but also having this life of purpose. But I have been really strong on having routine. You know, I have the same routine pretty much every day, irrespective of where I am in the world. I try and do the same thing every day. Get up, read all the newspapers, do all the emails, and then do an hour exercise. And that little hour of exercise, whether it's swimming or doing a big walk, that's your me time. And I put it in the diary now, and I say to people, I've got to have that hour, otherwise I'm not in great shape by 3 o'clock. So routine, but I really think for most people, having that sense of purpose and fulfillment is the most important thing.
You said earlier, I'm just going to jump back, you said you fought to achieve, I guess, you know, triumph over what was difficult childhood. But a lot of people can't. Like, it's, you know, when you're going through violence, a home that's broken, I don't know if that's fair to say, you know, you can go down the other path.
Absolutely. I was really lucky. I had two anchors in my life, my uncle and my grandmother. My grandmother lived with us for a long time. I shared a room with her, which most kids would say, you've got to be joking, sharing a room with your granny. But she was great company. She was a big reader, so that got me interested in reading. And then my uncle would take me fishing every weekend. And he was a very kind person. And he was like, you got to go to uni, you got to try and get out of this cycle. And he was also a great rescuer. He knew sometimes things were not great in our house, particularly on a Sunday. He'd come over, take everyone over to Avoca Beach, just to have afternoon tea next to his combi van. He was a great circuit breaker. He knew when things were not going to be good. And you've got to have people in your life. But many people, to your point, do not. And many people don't have those circuit breakers. They don't have their advocates. They don't, you know, and that's where society, in my view, has to step in. You know, when I used to live in public housing, but then ended up running the Department of Housing, which was, you know, odd. But I'd see kids that you think that kid is not going to have a circuit breaker. That kid's going to head down, to your point, a very unpleasant road. And we as a society have to be the people who are the circuit breakers.
A lot of people are just like, well, snap out of it. Get yourself out of it. Like,
absolutely.
We're in a cost of living crisis at the moment, and I mean this with respect, but if upper middle class people are complaining about the cost of eggs, I complain about the supermarket shopping. Imagine if you're a family with a single parent, 3 kids, living on a pension. I mean, you're screwed.
Absolutely. And, you know, like I know what that feels like. You know, I know that when my father and mother separated, you know, in those days it was not easy to get a single women's pension. It was very difficult, actually. And Mum just struggled. But they struggled together. You know, Christmas was not fun. Birthdays were a bit embarrassing. We didn't have big birthday parties, school excursions. We just didn't go on them sometimes, couldn't afford it. So I know what it looks like. And you're absolutely right. People don't know what it's like to wake up in the morning and think, I do not have food to put on the table tonight. Or to make these terrible choices that many people on a low income make. They're not making choices about where they go on holidays, right? They're making choices about, can I get the kids' teeth done? Can I get the new school shoes this year? Can I afford the fees? Do I go to the school and try and negotiate the fees? My mother had this absolute horror aversion of a particular guy in the housing department, and she would just hide from him, right? Because he was a bully, he was really an awful guy. And, you know, that's the life of so many people. Their life is a grind. They don't live, they function. Dad, every Sunday afternoon, would go and queue up for his railway ticket because in the morning it was too hard to get. That Mum and Dad would just do washing and ironing. You know, like, so when I see people now complaining about, I can't get into the restaurant I want to go into, I think, seriously? You know, for life out there for some people, it's just, for many people actually, it's terrible.
I won't say my age. I'm 322 in gay. I feel like I'm the times that we're in now with the cost of living and all of those things, it feels a bit terrifying. It feels like the closest, it feels the most scary I've ever experienced it in my life.
I couldn't agree more. And I think...
And I worry for people that
Yeah.
are in lower socioeconomic situations, looking after their kids, looking after their families, their pets, those things. Like, how do you pay those bills?
Could not agree more. And I think there's a big risk, and I gave a speech about this a couple of weeks ago, that we leave those people behind at our peril, because, you know, social cohesion is pretty easy to fracture. Those people build a great resentment. My parents were very resentful people. They really felt this chip on the shoulder. And to your point, people aren't doing anything wrong. They're just trying really hard. They just can't make ends meet. They can't get ahead. And I don't want our society to forget those people. And I don't want them to have conversations that are irrelevant to them. And I think a lot of conversations people are having just doesn't speak to that group of people. And I'm like you, I'm very worried about where our society is at the moment. I'm worried that we're just leaving just chunks of people behind and they just can't see how they fit into these big conversations because they don't think anyone's speaking to them. They don't, you know, to be honest, I think we should take action on climate change. I absolutely do. But I also know sitting out there is somebody who can't pay their electricity bill. And so if I talk to them about the critical nature of decarbonising the economy, they're going to say, I can't pay my bill, Jennifer.
And
they can't.
And what am I going to do?
And you know, we are not talking to working Australians in a respectful way, in my view. We're talking around them, and I think we'll pay a high price for that.
And the fear for me is around the mental health
Absolutely.
stuff, you know, for the kids of people that are struggling, for their families, but for the people themselves. I fear suicide rates, I fear all of these things because, as I said, this for me is the scariest time in my life financially.
Oh, for sure. And, you know, these things boil over. You know, they end up in violence. They end up in people doing things they never thought in a million years they would do. They end up with people taking their lives. And, you know, we just have to kind of stop and reset on the cost of living issues because, to your point, you're absolutely right, it's not an inconvenience, it's a catastrophe. And if your daily grind is juggling bills and juggling, you know, really fundamental things, not, you know, peripheral things, life is a tough existence. And we've got to do better at talking to people more respectfully, at looking at acknowledging that there are mental health issues associated with cost of living, that people are blaming themselves, I can't, you know, and they're bewildered. They're like, hang on, how do I get through the day?
Whatever your politics, it doesn't really matter. My view is, you know, I want everyone to have a good education or the right to a good education and good health.
Yeah.
But the thing that makes me disappointed or I feel sad about is that we're only really having these conversations because people that have money are the ones that are feeling the pinch now too.
I think it's a really good observation. I mean, you know, I now kind of sometimes go and get things at the shops and I think, boy, that cost a bit of money. And I think I always try and catch myself and think, okay, but you're a well-resourced person who's been successful in life. Now think about, you know, the world you came from and think about how those people are struggling. Think about what it means for them. And I think you're spot on. We're only concerned about cost of living now because it's hit a wider cross-section of people. But for so many people, for decades, that's their life. And we've got to do better.
Can I jump
Sure.
for a second? For you, mental health, you mentioned your mum, you believe that she would have, because when we were younger, we didn't really have these conversations. My late mum would be 71 now, but when she was alive, she had bipolar, worked in the public service as an executive, but even then it wasn't something that was talked about, and she was very open about her mental health and really suffered as a result of that because everyone just sort of dismissed her, A, as a woman, and B, as a woman who had mental health concerns. What experiences do you have for yourself in terms of dealing with those stressful times?
Well, Mum, you know, as I said, no, there was no diagnosis of that, but she was, you know, a very troubled person and very anxious and depressed and very down most of the time. You know, you know, the word joy, we never use the word joy much anymore, but I very seldom saw my parents, particularly my mother, experience any joy. And that was compounded by their low income and stuff. But So I saw that. Then I've seen people in the workplace who are really in trouble, but don't want to talk about it, and there isn't the environment to encourage people to speak about it. We're doing better now, but we're not as good as we should be. And then I've seen and know people who've killed themselves because they just cannot see a way through, and the shocking impact that has on people when people take their lives or try and take their lives. But also just people who are not functioning well because they're just mentally very, very unwell and they're not getting the right support. But to me, the kind of silver lining is we know the research, right? We know people can recover. We know people can get treatment. We know that there are certain circumstances that make things worse and certain circumstances that make things better. What really bugs me is that we know all these things, and then we just, every 5 years, we'll have another big review into mental health. We'll have another Royal Commission that tells us exactly what we already know. The system doesn't work. But we don't set about making the system work. I can't remember the data, but the number of people who commit suicide after they've been admitted for an acute episode is a very high number. And, of course, 1 is a high number in that case. But you just say, why can't we as a society embark on a system of change that's respectful, that's empathetic? I don't understand it. And I know in 5 years' time there'll be another Royal Commission that says that's a disaster. But what we have to, as a society, remember, what does the disaster mean? Well, it means today someone took their life. And that, to me, is the human side of this is unbearable.
You used the word, and it was quite profound. You said saved by a life, by purpose and routine.
Yeah.
That's quite a profound thing for me when I've been at my worst. I haven't believed in myself enough to be able to find that purpose, or I feel like I've lost that purpose, or I feel like my purpose isn't worth living for. It's more of an observation than a question.
Yeah, no, but purpose matters. And to me it's kind of, it doesn't have to be, like I've had a big purpose in life and I've been very privileged to occupy jobs where you can make, quite a big impact. But purpose is still, getting up and doing stuff. Purpose is having a routine. Purpose is, a job that gives you order in life. It doesn't have to be the big purpose that some of us are privileged enough to have, but it has to be something where you feel like you're doing something. And I see, one of the things that I notice a lot of people doing, there's a homeless guy who lives near me in Woolloomooloo, and I see him most mornings when I go for my walk. And every morning he goes to get a cup of coffee, which the people at the coffee shop give him every morning. And it's like a clockwork, the time. But that's his routine, that's his purpose. He does that to kind of have order in his life. So it doesn't have to be grand purpose, but it does have to be some structure. And I think when people get really, things get completely discombobulated, it's when there's no structure, no purpose.
I'm really excited to share something very special with you. I've always been open about my personal struggles, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. And now I've put it all into my book, Mental as Anyone. It's raw, it's real, and full of the lessons I've learned, alongside some expert wisdom from Dr. Jodie Lowinger to help you navigate your own mental health journey. The book hits shelves in all good bookstores nationally on June 25, but you can pre-order it right now on Amazon. The link is in the show notes. This book means the absolute world to me. I hope it helps you too. Being a woman leader, a female leader, being a gay woman, can we talk about that?
Yeah, of course.
Offline we had a bit of a chat, and I again wanted to be respectful with that conversation, but is it harder?
Yeah.
From a mental health perspective, but just from life perspective?
Yeah, look, it certainly was, at the time when I was kind of working and going up through the ranks of the public service. I make a kind of joke about the fact that no one ever asked you what you did on the weekend because they sort of knew about you, kind of, sort of. And it was as if asking you what you did on the weekend would confirm their worst nightmare, which is you'd gone out to dinner with your girlfriend. people would avoid conversations. That's not everybody. There were some very close friends of mine at work who knew. But, the first time Tess ever got invited to something was when I was at KPMG.
Right.
And that was 15 years ago. First time someone said, oh, would you like to invite your partner Tess to something? She didn't want to go because she doesn't like all those things. But so you spend a lot of time talking around issues. We have a joke now, Tess and I, that they is the new black, right? I used to use the expression they all the time. My partner, they, so that people didn't ask he or she, right? So that you could sort of have semi-normal conversations without admitting that your partner was a woman. So we laugh now that they is this very fashionable thing. Now people select to be called they, which is perfectly fine. But for us, it was a necessity. It wasn't something that you were doing out of choice. You did it because you had no choice. You had to anonymise the person you were in a relationship with. And then being a woman and being gay, you had to work harder, you had to be smarter, you had to, prove to people that you could do stuff. I worked in some very technical jobs, and, the Department of Housing, a very technical organisation. I had to work really hard at getting on top of the technical things so you could prove to people you could do it. I think things are a lot easier for women now. I'm not sure they're super easy for a lot of the queer community still. But, you just had to... The idea that it was kind of an easy run, it was not. It was hard. And, it gives you a lot of toughness, I have to say. It gives you a lot of resilience because you've got to be kind of pushing all the time. But it also at times was exhausting, to be honest.
How old were you when you and your missus got together?
So we've been together 37 years, so about 27, something like that. Yeah.
Back then, I think I haven't got the dates in front of me, but in the early 80s, it was illegal to be a gay man.
For men, yeah. I think people can never contemplate women are, which I think is, I think that's the kind of, but it's the only reason there's no law against it. It's kind of like almost inconceivable, but anyway.
But it was definitely not something you wouldn't walk down the streets holding Tessa's hand or...
You would not. When I first joined the Cabinet Office as a public servant, there was no way you would tell anybody. No way. That was a absolute no-no because, it's a very Catholic organisation, very, very strict organisation. There's just no way that you could tell anybody about that. So... And to be honest, it was my family, and, we've had a lot of conversations about this, but we got uninvited to Christmas for about 12 years.
Wow.
We just didn't get invited because people were so uncomfortable about it. Now, it didn't sort of end up bothering us all that much, but it was hurtful at the time. I mean, I look back at it now kind of with a bit of a wry smile, but it was very hurtful that no one bothered to invite. You just didn't get invited. And so my grandmother just kicked up her stink one day and said, well, I'm going to their place for Christmas.
How cool is that?
And then Mum, who wasn't known for her kind of social progression, she got the sick of it as well. She said, right, that's it. I'm going to their place for Christmas. We've got to stop this stuff. And then after that, things turned around a little bit. But, the idea that, you'd have to say, and this is the truth for so many people, whether it's social isolation, whether it's being in the queer community, I always pause on Christmas Day to think someone today is on their own because they've been rejected by their family, rejected by their network, whatever it is, and they're sitting there doing whatever for Christmas or they can't afford it or whatever. And Christmas was always, quite a challenging time for my family because they didn't have any money. But when you started being uninvited to things, you thought, really?
It's
was
already
very
challenging
hurtful,
and then...
very hurtful, yeah. And look, everyone's apologised since then, but I always say, yeah, but it happened. It happened for a long time.
And it's still happening.
And it's still happening, and it's happening to lots of people. And, I think a lot of people... I really... I know that transgender stuff is a controversial kind of topic, but I do feel that I really kind of get very cranky when I see people persecuting transgender people, blaming them for things that got nothing to do with them. I don't have lived experience of that, but I do know what it's like to be kind of cast away, and feeling an outcast. I can't imagine the level of isolation they feel. But a lot of people feel that, and a lot of people with serious mental health problems are alone. I mean, loneliness is something we just don't talk about. We just don't talk about loneliness. But so many people, they're just super lonely. And that really makes their mental health condition so much worse. And, every day they wake up in the morning knowing that they're not going to see any friends or have people to help them, or they're an elderly person who's just on their own. That I think we don't even talk about loneliness much, actually.
When do you feel lonely?
It's a great question, because sometimes you can be with a lot of people and feel lonely.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes you're at your loneliest when you're with a whole lot of people who you can't connect with.
Yeah.
So the loneliest experience I've felt is when I've been at things where you just think, I do not fit in here. I do not fit in here. And when I was going to university, I had some friends that when they found out I was gay, they just stopped talking to you. Again, they've come back years later and said they're terribly sorry, and they are. But, you'd be at things and you just didn't fit in, and you go to... I lived at one of the colleges at UNSW when I went to university, and you'd go to the famous Baxter Bassett Ball, and, I just ended up not going to these things. I was just so lonely at those things, because I thought, well, I'm not here to, find a bloke. I'm completely out of kilter with everybody here, so I just ended up not going.
Were you all, what point did you come out, like you said, being out at uni, but within a business or work perspective? Was it just that you were? I when I was 17,
Yeah.
and I came out in 1995, I said, I'm not going to ever hide that side of me, because if I have the strength, and it's been tough at times, at least hopefully that shows other people that there's other people that they can feel safe around.
Yeah, I did at university because it became really obvious, right? Not that I was seeing somebody, I wasn't. It was just, I was clearly, not going to get a boyfriend. I remember someone saying, I can't remember who it was now, when they saw me years later, they were talking to someone about me, and I was sitting next to them. Well, Jennifer was going through a very mentally difficult time then. I said, really? I was coming to terms with my sexuality. I didn't have anything wrong with me. It was challenging. So I did at university, but I didn't in the workplace for, certainly when I was a public servant, I didn't. I mean, I was most out around the marriage equality debate, because I thought, step up, you've got to step up here. When people started talking about kids, that people like me could not be around children, and I'd run the child protection system, I'd run the Department of Housing, I'd run the Department of Education, I knew what child protection looked like. That got my blood boiling. When people would say, this is all about the children, you think, is it? I don't think so. This is about fairness, this is about legitimacy. This has got nothing to do with who can look after children.
Gays are promiscuous, all of those things. You've been in a relationship for 37 years. I've been in a relationship for nearly 6 years. It's not like...
Yeah. Exactly. And, that... So, but certainly when I was a public servant, I wasn't out hardly at all, because it wasn't okay. And as a kid, I was a very lonely kid. And I know people find this hard to believe, that I was shy beyond comprehension. I tell that people now, they go, impossible. And at one stage wanted to go into a convent, into a silent order. What could possibly have gone wrong? And had enrolled, and my grandmother said, don't do it. Go to university. You're going to be the only person to go to university. Go to uni. And of course, you go to university, the world changes around you. But people don't believe it when I say I was chronically shy as a kid, very isolated, lived in my own little world, because that was my way of protecting.
And the convent, was that that wasn't because you were religious, that was because the solitude or the safety of being within a space?
A lot of it was about being religious. I was deeply religious as a kid. And one of the things I said in that speech that I feel very upset about is when I hear church leaders speaking about people like us in such a terrible way. I think, you took that faith that was very important to me as a young person, got me through many difficult times with my family. That almost got robbed of me. I felt kind of like that faith that was hugely defining in my life. And I really feel as a society, actually, we've lost that Christian Judaism structure to how we think about the world. And I think that's a shame, to be honest. But when the church tells you that your very essence of a person is unworthy, it's hard to stay with the church. And I feel that bit of my life got taken away from me. So I was deeply religious. I'd take myself, we didn't have a bus on Sundays, I'd walk myself 6 Ks to the church. I used to carry around the biography of John Paul XXIII.
Wow.
I was right into it.
And now?
No, not as much. No, again, if something rejects you, then it's hard to kind of come back to it. And I know the church has made a lot of gains here, but they haven't made enough.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think the perception of, fact, there's less women company bosses, big bosses, than there are men, fact. And there's various reasons, or people will give us various reasons for that. What do you think that reason for you is? And then secondly, what do you think the perception of women CEOs or business leaders or chair people or whatever is?
Yeah. Look, it is the fact that we don't have enough women in chief executive positions, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Mostly things that are controllable. We don't have enough women in the pipeline of leadership. Too many women are slotted into what I call the corporate affairs, HR side of the business. There's nothing wrong with that. You can't run a company if you haven't run the P&L, if you haven't done the actual operations. And so what I always say to people when they're developing women leaders, you've got to give them the kind of operational jobs. You've got to. So when I was in the Department of Housing, I wanted to be a regional director. I wanted to run the hard stuff of the business. I didn't want to come up through the corporate affairs. I wanted to run the operations because I knew that was the key to progress. You had to be across all of that material. So I think that's a fact, that we're not doing enough to manage pipelines really actively. I see great companies doing it. As a result, you've got some women in CEO positions. I think the other thing that's made it really difficult, which again we're working hard to fix, is access to childcare, access to paid parental leave, a whole different perception about paid parental leave and sharing of care duties and so on. I think in the next decade we'll see those numbers double. But it takes a long time to turn that ship around, because you've got to get people in so that they're successful in their jobs. The last thing you need, and this is why I'm a fan of targets but not quotas, because the last thing you need to do is to have people fail in their jobs, because that just creates a whole lot of ignorance and bad perceptions. You need women to be successful in their jobs, and that's about doing the hard yards of running the P&L, running the operations, understanding the business, and then getting into a leadership position and then staying there. And that's a decade-long strategy that we're on. We're not going to see that change.
We've been on that for a long
We have
time
been on
too,
it
for
a long
way
time.
too long.
Way too long. I mean, it's interesting. When I was at the BCI, I was a bit critical sometimes of some of the obligations of reporting on these things. But if I look back on that now, I think that's right. Like, you can't manage what you can't measure, to use that expression. But I do think, getting companies to report on it has made a difference. I just think we're not sharing enough of the best practices that propel women into leadership. And they're not rocket science. Flexible work, role modelling, behaviour, all of the things that are kind of 101. It's just not being done at a systemic level, I think. But, we've got a long way to go, particularly at the kind of top level of organisations. The US is a bit better. I mean, the US has got some big hitters sitting around those corporate tables.
And what do you think the perception is today of women in CEO positions more broadly?
Yeah, well, what's a really good point, because what I don't hear anymore, which is great, I don't hear women who are in the top positions described as ambitious in a negative way. So when I was, people would often say, Jennifer's a very ambitious person. It was never a compliment, right? And when you do those psychological testing things, if you tested as, these things that rate you red, or the Myers-Briggs test that, in my case, you kind of went off the Richter scale on one particular thing, that was bad, right? Whereas for a guy, that would have been great, right? That means they're going to be a tough manager and whatever. So I think the perception now, there's enough role models out there now to demonstrate that women are exceptionally competent leaders. They are, incredibly effective at their jobs, and we just need more and more of those role models. So I don't hear any more ambition described as a negative. I don't hear people who are perfectionists described as a negative. That's how people used to describe women who were striving. They're ambitious, that's bad. They're a perfectionist, that's bad. I don't hear that language anymore.
Couple of things before we wrap up. This leads into it. How do you deal as a leader of an organisation or anything with disparate views? So bringing people together on the same journey when people are all dealing with their own stuff in life. But it's hard to let that stuff not impact your decision making and so on. For male, female, whatever, sexuality.
Yeah. I think this is the real hard side of things here, because the first thing I think you've got to set is the leadership example. I think, that sounds cliche, but it's true. I think you can't get change in organisations if leaders don't live their values and if they don't behave their values. I think the other thing which often is scoffed about in corporate Australia or the corporate world more generally is when people set values and behaviours down, and they are hugely important. And so I think you can say to people, I think it's harder to change people's beliefs, albeit I think with education and inclusion you can over time change people's beliefs. But what you can't be ambiguous about is their behaviour. And I think good, high-performing organisations set very strict rules about how people are to behave, respectful, courtesy, and they stamp on it when they see it not happening. And I think once you've sort of done that, then it's a lot safer for people to declare they're not well, to talk about their sexuality. I think on the mental health side, we're still not managing the stigma of that. People do not want to declare to their line manager particularly that they've got bipolar disorder or they've got anxiety and depression because they feel that they won't get the jobs. We're not doing enough to design jobs around how people's mental health is working for them.
Really good point.
There are some jobs where I used to watch this when I was in consulting. You think, well, when I was a partner at KPMG, these are big highs and big lows. You'd win a huge tender, you'd lose a big tender. You think, boy, people who have got mental health problems, we've got to make sure we design jobs in ways that doesn't kind of really impact on people. I just think that it's very important that we create safe environments for people, and you've got to be tough on people's behaviour. Like I think, people who, in the days when I was growing up in the public service, people were famous for shouting at people or throwing things at people. Now, thankfully, I'm hoping today that anybody who thought shouting at someone was a good idea is out of their job pretty quickly, or worse, throwing something at someone. But when I was in the public service, this was like a legend. People were so-called legends because they'd shout at people, and that I think has got to stop, because if you were a woman or living with a mental illness and you had a bully managing you, your life was hell, and you did not want to come to work. And so we're getting better at it. Could we be better? Yeah, we could do a lot better.
Where do you find that strength? Because people would probably describe me as being quite tough at times, or even a little bit scary, because I'm a journalist can be scary. But where do you find that strength? Because inside I'm crumbling often.
Sometimes you've got to let people see the vulnerable side of you, because it does make you look real to people. I think there's just ways of behaving where you can be really... tough's not the right word. To me, you have to do your job to the best of your ability. And, I was notorious for sending things back to people and saying this could be written better, this could be better done. And you knew that people did not like you correcting spelling mistakes or writing on files, I think we've got this the wrong way around, or critiquing people's work. But you've got to remember that's your job, right?
Yeah.
Your job is to make sure things are done well. I think it's style. I think it's a way of speaking to people. It's a way of being respectful to people. And I do think, that showing people you're a bit vulnerable too sometimes doesn't hurt. And I think the other thing that puts people at ease is if you say, I'm not sure what to do here.
Yeah.
I actually genuinely don't know what to do, so I'm listening to people's views. I want everyone to feel like they can input into this decision, because I genuinely don't know what to do about this. And you'd be amazed how that would just unleash people, right? They think, she doesn't know what to do. Fantastic. So here's my idea. And letting people have that contest of ideas is hugely impactful. But you've got to just, and we all have to do it. I have to check tone quite a bit, because it's not being rude, it's just like cut to the chase with people.
You're busy.
You're busy, right? My media director would send me a text, Blah wants to interview you this afternoon, and I just send back no, because it wasn't being rude. It was just like, no. There wasn't any explanation. No, I don't want to do it. I haven't got time. I've got too many other things to do. And he and I got used to that. When I first sent a no back, he was like, no end? I said, but there is no end. There's just no. And I'm happy to say, dear Blah, the answer to this question is no, but I don't have time to write that text message.
I love that you said yes to this, so it's really very special. I'm going to finish off by asking you, and I do this every time, on a scale of 0 to 10, where are you today?
Today I'm about a 6.5, because I've spent the last week on planes, travelling all across Asia, doing great things, doing important things, but last night I woke up and I thought, I genuinely do not know where I am. And Tess said, wait, you got to wake up properly, because I think you're very disoriented. I think you don't know where you are. And I said, I do not know where I am. She said, you're home, you're safe, you're with me, it's all okay. And I said, I've been in a different hotel every night for 10 days and I'm completely discombobulated. So I'd give myself a 6.5, 7 today. I'm normally a 9, yeah.
You look very good, and you're speaking very eloquently for someone who is a 6.5, 7. Jennifer Westacott, thank you for joining us on Mental as Anyone.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
This episode is supported by Chemist Warehouse, Australia's leader in health and wellness products. Whether you're looking for natural supplements, fitness essentials, or everyday healthcare, Chemist Warehouse has you covered at unbeatable prices. They're proud to support this podcast and help you take control of your health and well-being. Head to chemistwarehouse.com.au for the best selection of vitamins, wellness products, and more to keep you feeling your best. BYD has taken it to the next level with the all-electric Sea Lion 7, a performance SUV that's as sleek as it is powerful. We're talking quiet luxury, up to 482 kilometres of range, and a 0 to 100 kilometres per hour in just 4.5 seconds. It's smooth, it's fast, and honestly, sustainability has never looked this good. With 4 luxe colours, including the stunning Shark Grey, this is EV driving elevated. If you're even a little bit curious, check out the links in the show notes. Big thanks to BYD for making this podcast possible. I know firsthand how overwhelming life can get, and I also know how powerful it is when you have the right tools to get you through it. That's why I've written Mental as Anyone, a book filled with real stories, practical strategies, and expert insights to help you manage stress, anxiety, and everything life throws your way. With clinical psychologist Dr. Jodie Lowinger providing her professional insights. It'll be on shelves in all good bookstores nationally on June 25, but you can pre-order it right now on Amazon. The link is in the show notes. If you've ever felt like you're struggling alone, this book is for you. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Mental as Anyone. There's been some heavy insights in there, but also some useful tools for all of us to move forward. If you want to be the first to hear new episodes, be sure to hit follow. And if you find yourself in need of support, links to Lifeline, Beyond Blue, and the Black Dog Institute are in the show notes below. See you later.